And I would walk by a store window and catch a sight of myself, and it would like, oh, who's that?
You were surprised.
Yeah.
It would be surprising to see Jane Fonda at 87 years old. The lady who formerly drank herself into filming naked scenes due to her severe body dissatisfaction has had a remarkable comeback after a half-century of regrettable cosmetic surgery, a cancer scare, and a fitness business that amassed millions. Not only is her current appearance surprising, but it's also a direct challenge to Hollywood, which predicted her complete worthlessness after she was 40. Though she had a gorgeous last name and was born into stardom, Jane Fonda endured a lot of hardship and suffering. Henry Fonda was a famous Hollywood actor, but he was icy and harshly critical at home. Even though Jane loved him, he hurt her deeply with his fixation on her appearance. He never actually stated it, but it was clear. He didn't love her if she wasn't flawless. It was more than simply words. Jane needed to change her wardrobe or lose weight, so he would occasionally have his wife inform her. As a young girl, you will always feel the weight of that type of expectation. It sent Jane on a path of self-doubt, poor body image, and ultimately regrettable plastic surgery that lasted decades. At the tender age of 12, Jane's mother, Frances Ford Seymour, who had a history of mental illness, which she was unaware of at the time, returned home one day, accompanied by a nurse, and summoned the children. From that point on, things only became worse. Angry and irritated, Jane stayed upstairs and refused to see her. She returned to the hospital that night to take her life. Jane's dad lied and stated their mom passed away from heart failure. Even if it was a falsehood intended to shield them, it exacerbated the situation. The worst possible way for Jane to learn the truth was when she was at school and read an item in a magazine that stated her mother had committed herself. Unfiltered, unfiltered, unfiltered. Just the truth as it is written. She felt as if her mother had vanished into thin air once the crushing shock subsided. No photos, no tales. Nothing remained of her when her father erased them all. Jane kept thinking it was her fault for a very long time. Young people act out in this way, and they often hold themselves responsible. Decades later, while she penned her book, she discovered her mother's medical documents with a handwritten narrative that her mother had preserved. That is when Jane realized her mother was ill, not weak or unkind. Everything shifted after that. Even though they dealt with it differently, Jane Fonda's brother Peter Fonda also went through it. Jane repressed her feelings of hurt, whereas Peter was younger, more emotionally expressive, more sensitive. They were quite competitive and distant in their relationship. At other times, they would aggressively defend one another, and at other times, they would go months without speaking. Peter, according to Jane, was devastated that their mother was forgotten and went to extreme lengths, including leaving presents in an empty chair to make sure someone would remember her. Even though it was difficult, there was love between them despite their differences. Modeling was an attempt by Jane to discover who she was. When she was younger, she looked absolutely radiant and made it onto the cover of Vogue. Everything appeared to be going swimmingly from the outside. But deep inside, she was crumbling. She began fighting bulimia while she was a teenager. She couldn't escape it. She would secretly overeat and then purge many times. She was so good at hiding it that nobody noticed. No matter how sick, tired, or furious she was, she couldn't stop. At first, she doubted she would live to be 30. Her breakout role was in 1960's Tall Story, in which she chased after Anthony Perkins as a college cheerleader. It was the polar antithesis of the strong, political, and fearless lady she would become. It was carefree and full of fun. Regardless, it made her famous. However, her work as an actress was more than simply making movies. she was also balancing a life behind the scenes, where her insecurities were more noticeable than the cheers from onlookers. Jane still lacked self-assurance in her abilities, despite the Golden Globe and critical acclaim for Walk on the Wild Side. It seemed as if she lacked confidence in her own beauty. Even Hollywood couldn't save her. At one point, studio brass even recommended she had her jaw broken and her back teeth out so she could look better in a movie. Such a remark does more than hurt, it lingers. She paid for acting classes and modeled while covering up her insecurity about her appearance. Ironically, her self-esteem issues paved the way for a surprising career path. In the 1980s, she became famous for her fitness films, which she created out of her unhealthy fixation on her body image. However, preceding that, Lee Strasberg was present. With apprehension and a need for genuine approval, she made her way to his studio. She wanted to hear it from someone who knew acting, not from critics or relatives. Initially, Strasberg seemed aloof and frightening due to his chilly demeanor, but he eventually warmed up to her. Everything shifted when he informed her she was talented. She now felt like an actor, rather than only a name in the industry. It inspired her to leave her role as Henry Fonda's daughter and go headfirst into training. Acting in French films such as Joy House and Circle of Love, she began to take chances, even going so far as to be naked on screen, something no American actress had the guts to do back then. She also declined the starring part in Dr. Zhivago. 9 months shooting in another country? Too valuable to risk losing agency over her own life. That was Jane, following no one else's lead, even if it meant passing on a box office smash. Also, there were some strange tales, such as the now famous one about her rendezvous with Václav. The story says that she appeared for the formal tea wearing nothing but her gloves and pearls after being ordered to do so. According to other accounts, she even rode a motorbike around the hallways while partially undressed. The legend persisted, even though the event likely never took place, because it sounded so outrageous and Jane-like, rebellious, dramatic, and unforgettable. With Cat Ballou, she broke through in 1965. The role she played, a teacher who becomes an outlaw, was a smashing success. One of the most successful films of the year, it mingled humor with gritty Western elements. Jane Fonda became an indelible star in Hollywood after receiving 5 Oscar nominations for the role. While accepting the Oscar, her co-star Lee Marvin made the now famous joke that his inebriated horse should have half of the glory. However, Jane considered respect to be the true reward. At last, she had arrived, not as the daughter of her father, not as a model, not even as a gossip in the tabloids, but as a real celebrity in her own right. The 1964 French film La Chinoise featured a naked Jane, shocking audiences in both Europe and Hollywood. It had never been done before by any famous American actress. The problematic aspect of the film, which was directed by Roger Vadim and was based on a play by Arthur Schnitzler, was not just its nudity, but also its time. A massive nude portrait of Fonda appeared on a Times Square billboard, shocking an already conservative America. While some applauded her courage, others were furious. The film received a Golden Globe nomination despite the intense criticism it received. Italy took a turn for the worst in 1967 when the government caved to pressure from the Catholic Church, and 5 film actors, including Fonda and Vadim, were convicted with obscenity. Fonda was unhappy with the way her likeness was utilized in the American adaptation of the picture, but Vadim appeared unconcerned because of his reputation for pushing boundaries. The censors imposed an awkward white square covering portion of her torso, which she thought was absurd. It was now quite evident, though, that Jane Fonda was more than simply Henry Fonda's daughter. As she grew into an independent actor, she became daring and brave. Vadim was the love of Fonda's life when she was filming La Chinoise. Their love blossomed quickly, and they tied the knot in Las Vegas in 1965. However, this was more than a love story. It was the beginning of a greater endeavor. Her new image was shaped in part by Vadim. Barbarella, a raucous science fiction picture brimming with color, imagination, and sex appeal, was their most well-known work from 1968. It was challenging because the part was very different from her previous work. Anorexia, depression, and an addiction to diet pills were some of Fonda's struggles. Because of Vadim's history with Brigitte Bardot, she too had feelings of insecurity. At the beginning of the film, Fonda was seen again nude, but this time she was in zero gravity. She drank herself to sleep through the shoot because she was so anxious. She was inebriated for the most part, she confessed afterward. Vanessa, their daughter, was born the same year to her and her husband. It didn't earn much money, yet the movie became famous anyway. Vadim was dubbed the king of erotic trash by one critic. But regardless of their thoughts, the influence was immense. Fonda was famous after Barbarella. Life magazine featured her on its cover and proclaimed her the most fantasized about lady on the planet. The formerly timid American girl from a prominent family has become an outspoken sex icon all around the world. Though I must admit that not all aspects of that era were uplifting. Something terrible occurred in France in 1966 while filming The Game Is Over. There were some naked sequences in the film, but Fonda consented to them under tight circumstances, including her faith in the crew, the closure of the set, and her belief that Vadim would cut them out. A photographer, on the other hand, crept up into the ceiling and photographed her nude as the scene was being shot. Unauthorized use of her likeness appeared in Playboy magazine. Fonda was in utter shock. For $3 million, she sued the magazine. "It rocked me," she remarked. "It was an absolute breach of confidentiality. It was a watershed moment." The picture itself was not well received. Vadim despised the final product, and the American dub was terrible. In an effort to maintain command, he began filming simultaneously in French and English. However, the stolen photographs caused the most harm. That her body might be used for exploitation was a sobering lesson for Fonda, no matter how much she tried. Jane Fonda's life took a dramatic turn in 1969. Many still thought of her as a stunning Hollywood starlet, famous for her beauty but unrespected for her acting chops up to that point. After They Shoot Horses, Don't They came out, everything changed. It was a somber and moving film about individuals competing in a dance marathon during the Great Depression. Gloria, portrayed by Jane, was a bitter, shattered woman who was tested to her limits. At first, critics weren't certain she was the right choice. But as the cameras started rolling, she shocked everyone. Her performance was tragic, self-assured, and unfiltered. She gained a new audience and critical acclaim for the part. She had more to offer than simply her attractive appearance. She had spoken her mind and would no longer be silent. 2 years later, in Clute, she demonstrated it once more. Bree Daniels, a New York City call lady, was entangled in an enigmatic inquiry, and she played the role. Jane had her reservations about her ability to successfully perform the part, so landing it was no picnic. She went so far as to request that the director find a replacement for her. However, rather of withdrawing, she fully immersed herself in the role. At night, she would go to nightclubs and observe the sex workers, paying close attention to their every move and word. The more she watched, the more she felt a connection, even though she first felt like an outsider, since she was too rich and insulated. After all that effort, Jane finally won an Oscar. and the picture was a smashing success. Above all, she broke yet another Hollywood cliché. She was more than a sympathetic bystander. Her character had depth, strength, and authenticity. Women in such a prominent role were unusual, and Jane made it unforgettable. Aside from her booming career, she was also rapidly becoming politically conscious. She wanted to be a powerful character, not only portray one. In 1968, upon her return from France, she plunged wholeheartedly into activism. The authorities took note of her activism after she openly voiced her disapproval of injustice and held fundraisers for the Black Panthers. The Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, started tapping her phone, trailing her, and even breaking into her residence. Despite her fear, Jane persisted. During protests, she sided with Native Americans, backed Angela Davis, and would not remain silent. She and her husband were under the watchful eye of both British and American intelligence agencies, as shown by papers discovered many years later. She felt relentless pressure from all directions, and it eventually led her away from Hollywood and into the political opposition movement. Next, in November 1970, there was the incident at the airport. The Cleveland police detained Jane as she returned from a college tour of Canada. The fact that they found pills, vitamins, she claimed, in her baggage during the search was irrelevant. They detained her on charges of narcotics trafficking. She then learned that the White House may have ordered her detention as part of a bigger plot to have her silenced. The charges were dismissed when lab testing confirmed her statements were true. Her classic mug photo, nevertheless, with a raised fist and an expression of defiance, went viral. The shot was used for documentaries and put on billboards years later. She went so far as to sell mugs and shirts with the image, transforming a smear campaign into a symbol of pride. All of that, however, paled in comparison to the events of 1972. During the height of the conflict, she boarded a plane to North Vietnam while disguised as a local and bearing messages sent by anti-war activists back home. Hospitals, schools, industries, and communities that had been blasted out were her stops for 2 weeks. Every trip had been meticulously organized by the North Vietnamese. They showed her just what they wanted her to see. Fonda finally broke down after seeing the wreckage of the Bach Mai Hospital, where American bombs had killed both patients and physicians. The conflict shifted her perspective from a political argument to a terrible personal tragedy. She grew increasingly certain that the United States was aligned with the other side as she delved further. Farmers, students, soldiers, and women's groups were among those she encountered. They had all lost so much, yet were determined not to give up. Fonda was moved by the resiliency of the American soldiers and requested permission to address them personally. The Viet Cong nodded too. She taped more broadcasts in the following days. Unflinchingly, she charged the United States administration of deceit, war crimes, and even genocide. She commended the Vietnamese combatants and agreed with their 7-point peace proposal. American pilots and inmates were the intended targets of the broadcasts. In the confines of their jail cells, many were compelled to repeatedly hear her voice. The same individuals, speaking years later, claimed it almost drove them mad. What transpired on her last day in Hanoi, though, set the stage for a firestorm unlike any of that. Her destination was an anti-aircraft position, the same sort that the United States employed to shoot down planes. She got into the driver's seat of one of the cannons while donning a military helmet and laughing with the men. Pictures were taken by cameras. Her smiling face on a weapon headed straight toward her own country caused quite a stir. Legislators wanted to press charges against her, veterans accused her of betraying them, and Hanoi Jane was born out of thin air. There was more to come. 7 American troops who had been captured were brought face to face with Fonda before she left. As the meeting unfolded, cameras were rolling. Inmates testified that they were treated fairly, and Fonda took their word for it. She went so far as to say that the concept of brainwashing was even scoffed aside. She continued to label the soldiers liars and propaganda puppets when they returned home with accounts of torture, even after some of their accounts were shown to be true. She carried the weight of her denial of the possibility that she had been manipulated for years and years. Her return to the United States caused a national upheaval. Her reputation took a hit, and she was singled out alongside Nazi propagandist Axis Sally. Veteran organizations picketed her, and some states even attempted to prohibit her films. She was no longer an actress. She was too beautiful for anybody in Hollywood to touch. Before she could come back, she had to remake herself completely, which took 5 years. Refusing to run, she instead stepped up her game. She founded her film firm in 1976 and began producing films that aligned with her political views. She declined major parts that she felt did not support a cause she was passionate about. Her film credits spanned the years 1977 to 1981, and they all took aim at nuclear power, injustice, corruption, and war. She was making comments through her performance, and it was effective. She rose to become one of the industry's most likable celebrities. Coming Home, a narrative about Vietnam servicemen and the anguish they carried back, was her most personal undertaking. The project was her baby for 6 years. Producers and directors pulled out, and leading performers turned down the part, all because studios saw it as disloyal. Fonda, nevertheless, persisted, though. She oversaw the hiring of screenwriters, paid for their services, and ultimately got the picture produced. It was a huge deal when it was released. Not only did it win 3 Oscars, but it also made Americans confront the emotional and physical toll that war takes on all sides.
12 days following the release of her book, The China Syndrome, which dealt with the cover-up of a nuclear power station, a genuine nuclear accident occurred in Pennsylvania, which was one of the most unsettling events in her career. It was a terrifying time. All of a sudden, her film seemed like a warning that nobody had taken seriously. The people couldn't turn a blind eye to it, and critics did as well. The film's meteoric rise to the top of the box office rankings provided a potent new banner for the anti-nuclear campaign. An accident sent her on a course she hadn't anticipated, even if her activism provided her with purpose. She suffered a broken ankle during filming in 1978. Ballet was her primary form of exercise before her injuries. She sought out alternative methods of physical fitness rather than just watching TV. After discovering a novel kind of exercise, she swiftly expanded her firm into a thriving enterprise.
She achieved multi-millionaire status after launching a fitness DVD, publishing a book, and opening a studio. Not only did her name become associated with activism and film, but also with health, style, and fitness. She was in every room, on every screen, and she donated her wealth to charities she felt strongly about. Henry Fonda, her father, was her rock through it all. He had earned several accolades, but none of them were an Oscar. That was altered by Jane. The rights to a narrative that they may adapt jointly were purchased by her. He won only a few months before he passed away, and they shot on Golden Pond. Jane, her eyes welling up with sorrow, accepted the accolade on his behalf. At last, their once strained link had mended. She revealed a different side, a daughter attempting to make peace, at that moment more than in any protest or speech. It seems like Jane Fonda had it everything in the 1980s: celebrity, power, and critical praise. She was establishing production businesses, winning accolades, and starring in smash shows like 9 to 5 and The Morning After. However, she was subtly disintegrating beneath it all. She felt empty, even in the limelight. Her patience had run out by 1991. Without a word, she left Hollywood after decades in the business. A solemn farewell, a last bow. After that, she vanished. Depression, uncertainty, and a desperate quest for purpose characterized the subsequent chapter. Ted Turner's marriage, which consumed her physically but not emotionally, was at the core of everything. While Fonda's previous description, "That's not love, it's babysitting," was spot on, something changed when she was away from the screen. It was faith that she discovered to be greater. In her faith, she found Christ. As if her personal life wasn't already complicated enough, that shift strained her relationship with Turner. Still, she avoided the limelight, the red carpets, and the cameras throughout it all. She gave her whole attention to healing, activism, and herself. Everything changed in 2005 when one unforeseen moment occurred. Returning to the big screen for Monster-in-Law, she was 67 years old. It was a comedy starring Jennifer Lopez, and wasn't made with the intention of winning an Oscar. But Jane had a plan. She anticipated that J.Lo-Yo's fans would be out in large numbers, and she was banking on their rediscovery of her. She had a point. A new chapter in Fonda's career began with The Picture, which grossed over $150 million. The news that she had returned, and was even more incisive, hilarious, and fearless than before, stunned everyone. Its momentum persisted. She had some success in movies, but her true calling was in television. New milestones were set by the Netflix series Grace and Frankie, which starred Lily Tomlin and Fonda. Not only was it popular, but it also changed the way older women were portrayed in Hollywood. Rather from being simple plot devices or incidental characters, these were complex, daring, and vibrant. It was successful. Both the audiences and Hollywood were captivated by it. Being in your 70s isn't a death sentence. It's an opportunity to start over, as Fonda had shown. But in real life, she started to make a lot more noise. After Greta Thunberg said, "Our house is on fire," in 2019, Jane Fonda did more than simply write about it. She relocated to Washington, D.C., and began hosting Fire Drill Fridays. She protested every week. Arrest was a weekly possibility for her. Plus, she was arrested no less than 4 times while she was in her 80s. However, she persisted. She championed indigenous rights, denounced fossil fuel companies, and rallied people to oppose climate change. After taking her activism to the next level in 2022, with the formation of the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, her focus shifted from protest to politics. She was a political fundraiser who supported candidates and took a tough stance against the fossil fuel industry. It was successful. Her PAC was instrumental in the election of scores of climate-focused officials in the span of a year. Fonda was never one to claim she was unbeatable, no matter how many times she won. In 2020, she announced to the world at the Oscars that she had had enough of faking by switching from blonde to silver hair and refusing to tint her hair, shop for an identity, or chase after youth. Coming to terms with her age, she spoke openly about her regrets, mortality, and the will to live. She accepted her skin cancer diagnosis, bid farewell to vanity, and confronted her own death head-on. Becoming a fitness icon was never Jane Fonda's original intention. When she hurt her foot in 1979 while filming The China Syndrome, it all started. Ballet, her primary form of exercise, was now out of the question. Consequently, she did not sit on her hands but rather co-founded a modest fitness center in Beverly Hills with her friend Lenny Kasdan. Jane and Lenny's Workout was the name they gave it. The establishment skyrocketed in popularity in a matter of weeks, despite its unassuming decor of mirrors and mats. Every week, her high-energy aerobics courses attracted around 2,000 eager students. Jane was the one who made it unique. There was a time when she was the morning class instructor. She was sweating it out alongside the rest of us, not merely a famous person cashing in. Everyone took notice of that. It was as if they had joined a fresh movement. Despite the public criticism she was still receiving for her involvement throughout the Vietnam War, her fitness studio managed to remain unaffected. It evolved into a spot where individuals might unwind and just relocate. In response to rising demand, Jane expanded her studios to other locations, such as Encino and San Francisco. However, while other locations soon closed, the Beverly Hills facility remained open for more than 10 years, until it too closed in 1991. By that point, Jane had created something far greater. She had expanded her business from a few morning sessions to a full-fledged fitness empire, and that was only the beginning. Jane took a risk in 1982 when video cassette recorders were widely unavailable in the United States. A guy called Stuart Carl came up to her with a suggestion: make a home movie of her exercise routine. Despite her initial reluctance, Jane decided to give it a go since she didn't know anybody with a video cassette recorder. Her now iconic phrase, "Feel the burn," was part of her routine that was recorded and released as Jane Fonda's workout. In an unprecedented turn of events, individuals went out and bought VCRs specifically to play her tape. In the end, it became the first non-theatrical DVD to top the charts with sales of 17 million copies. The training recording had a profound impact on both her life and popular culture. It seemed like out of nowhere, everyone was donning leg warmers, and she was featured prominently in magazines. At the same time, in 1985, 3 of her videos were on Billboard's Top 10 list. That wasn't the end of it. Including one at age 75, she released 29 additional training videos throughout the years. She became the first person with a non-technical background to be admitted into the Video Hall of Fame, a testament to the immense effect she had. Jane persisted in disproving naysayers even after all these years. She wore a daring purple Armani gown to win the SAG Life Achievement Award in 2025. She addressed the audience with poise and confidence, declaring, "Empathy is not weak or woke. It's the foundation of meaningful change." Her words were more than simply words on paper. They were a statement. Regardless of how popular she became, Jane had always spoken up when she felt strongly enough about an issue. Viva Vadim, her granddaughter, and her walked the red carpet together at the Time Earth Awards Gala shortly thereafter. Once again, she was the center of attention in her deep purple Max Mara costume. Her critics lauded her for maintaining her strong sense of style. Instead of trying to hide her age, she embraced it, defied convention, and fashioned aging as an asset.